du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich.
This was a speech that Hitler gave a few years before he started the fiercest war the world had ever seen, World War II. A war this fierce usually has tactics and strategies filled to the brim, each in respect to one-up the enemy. This war would be confusing for many if the tactics and strategies were not explained. So today, I'm going to tell you guys about all the interesting tactics and strategies that went into use during World War II by Germany. September 1st, 1939. Just a few years after the speech that Hitler gave at the Reichstag, the invasion of Poland had taken place. Thousands and thousands of Nazi soldiers had stormed the nation of Poland and conquered the nation using a strategy known as Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg, literally known in German as lightning war, is a strategy that Hitler used to invade Poland and other countries like France with astonishing speed and force. Blitzkrieg is a way of the army to win by not fighting, but instead confusing and dislocating the enemy. The army would locate the enemy's weak points and spearhead through and disrupt the enemy's back ranks. The troops and the tank divisions, or known in German as the Panzer and the Wehrmacht, units on the ground, were not the only units required for a successful blitzkrieg. The air support was also one of the most important forces needed for a successful blitzkrieg. They support the armed forces' push into the enemy territories. In an ideal world, a blitzkrieg would look something like this. The panzer units would locate a weakness in the enemy lines. After, they would communicate that weakness to the Air Force division. The Air Force would then bomb that area even more and weaken it. After that, the troops and the tank units would then penetrate the enemy lines in a spearhead formation. With this tactic, Germany had conquered much of Europe, and also with this tactic, Germany had started emerging as one of the most powerful military forces in Europe. Not only is the Blitzkrieg strategy the most important thing used in the war, the other important force used was the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe, or the Air Force Division of Nazi Germany, was controlled by Hermann Göring, a leader of the Nazi Party. The Luftwaffe was the most important part of Nazi Germany and was the most important part of the invasion campaigns and battles against enemy countries. The Luftwaffe would bomb strategic weak points, troop concentrations, and airfield bases. This would allow the panzer units to push in. The Luftwaffe would dive bomb, and this made them incredibly strong. But even though they were incredibly strong by themselves, weak coordination and placement of the Air Force in battles led to the weakening of the Luftwaffe's power during World War II, and they eventually lost to the superior Spitfires of the Royal Air Force of Britain. Another great strategical weapon that the Germans used was called the Enigma Code. The Germans had conjured up a code that looked impossible to break, and this allowed the Nazis to send transmissions over to their allies without fear of them being intercepted and read. This allowed them to transmit messages across the seas to their allies without Britain or the other countries reading them. After a while, however, the British managed to break the code using something known as a Turing machine, developed by Alan Turing, and they could now launch strategical attacks based on their transmissions. Slowly but surely, Germany's power over Eastern Europe began to wane, and they did not have as much land or power as they did before, as the Allies were now finding new and improved weapons and tactics that counter Nazi Germany's own weapons and tactics. As the Allies were now invading their territory, the Third Reich would soon come to crumble down, and this was all because Nazi Germany decided to overestimate their military prowess and launch campaigns and invasions that were physically impossible to carry out. Their interesting weapons and their strategical prowess was overexceeded by their overestimation of their own military forces, which led to them losing the war.